All right, so get ready because we're diving deep into some wild stuff today.
Yeah, we're talking brain diseases, treatments, the future.
Like a future where we can actually treat things like Parkinson's and Alzheimer's.
Even blindness, reversing it, that kind of future.
Feels pretty sci-fi, right? But that's what we're looking at.
That's what this book chapter lays out, 10 promising treatments.
Chapter 20 from, well, we won't get into the whole title, but you get the idea.
The point is we've got articles, studies, all sorts of research here.
Plus, your own notes and expertise, so let's break it down.
Yeah, let's figure out what's actually promising.
And how close we are to these treatments actually helping people.
Okay, so where do we even start? Gene therapy, maybe?
Gene therapy, yeah. That's got to be one of the most mind-blowing ideas.
Actually going in and fixing genes, that's like next level stuff.
I would have thought that was decades away, but I seem to remember.
Oh, it's already being used for rare genetic disorder, at least.
What was it called?
ALD, adrenoleukodystrophy. And that's a huge deal. That's success.
Because it means the technology actually works.
Exactly. We can target and correct the root cause of some diseases.
Instead of just, trying to manage the symptoms forever.
That's the hope. Obviously, applying it to more common things.
Like Alzheimer's?
Yeah, Alzheimer's or Parkinson's, that's way more complex.
But still, if it works for LD, there's got to be potential there.
Right, it gives you hope. So gene therapy, that's about genes, but
What about stem cells? They've been promising for a long time, right?
stem cells are like the blank slates of the body.
They can become any type of cell, right?
Exactly. And in the brain, we have neural stem cells.
So the idea is they can repair damaged brain tissue.
Yeah, that's the hope, especially for things like Parkinson.
Parkinson's, right, because specific cells are dying off there.
Dopamine-producing neurons, and they're crucial for movement.
So could you, transplant healthy stem cells in to replace those?
That's what researchers are trying to do, transplant them right into the affected areas.
Like replacing the missing puzzle piece.
In a way, yeah, but it's tricky making sure those cells integrate, survive.
And actually become the right type of cell.
Right, it's not simple. Okay, moving on, let's talk deep brain stimulation.
Deep brain stimulation, yeah, that's the brain pacemaker, right?
That's a pretty good analogy, actually.
But how does it actually work? You implant electrodes and then what?
So those electrodes, they disrupt faulty brain circuits.
The circuits that are causing problems.
Exactly. And in Parkinson's, that means tremors, rigidity.
And the effects are almost immediate, right? I've heard that.
Yeah, it's pretty remarkable to see. It's not a cure, but...
But it can drastically improve someone's quality of life.
Exactly. And it's been most effective for Parkinson's so far, but...
They're looking into it for other conditions too, right?
Epilepsy, OCD, even chronic pain. Lots of possibility.
So DBS, that's kind of like rewiring the brain's circuitry?
In a way, yeah, but it does involve surgery. What about?
Non-invasive approaches. We've got to have some of those.
Oh, definitely. Transcranial magnetic stimulation, TMS for one.
TMS, right. So no surgery there.
No surgery. It uses magnetic pulses to influence brain activity.
Magnetic pulses. How does that even work?
You put a coil on the scalp, it delivers these pulses.
And they pass through the skull and reach the brain? That's wild.
They can either stimulate or inhibit activity, depending on what you need.
Wow. And what kinds of things can it treat?
It's been surprisingly effective for depression.
Depression? Really?
Yeah, especially cases where medication doesn't work well.
Interesting. Anything else?
Anxiety, chronic pain, stroke rehabilitation, there's ongoing research.
So TMS is like rebooting the brain circuits, kind of?
Sort of, yeah. Okay, there's another non-invasive one.
What is it? I think I remember the name being a bit intimidating.
Transcranial direct current stimulation.
Oh yeah, TDCS. That's the one with a weak electrical current, right?
That's the one. Electrodes on the scalp, very weak current.
So we're talking tiny bit of electricity going through the brain. Is that safe?
It's incredibly weak, much lower than anything harmful.
So how does it work then?
It basically makes neurons more or less likely to fire.
And what kinds of benefits could that have?
Well, it's early, but research suggests it could boost cognitive function.
Like help with learning and stuff?
Yeah, potentially. And it might also help with depression, chronic pain.
So like brain enhancement with a little zap of electricity.
Haha, sort of. But it's important to remember this
Yeah.
is still experimental. We need more research on the long-term effects.
So not something to try at home?
Definitely not without expert guidance. Okay, ready for something even more futuristic.
Bring it on. We've already covered some pretty wild stuff.
Neuroprosthetics.
Neuro what?
Neuroprosthetics, think brain-controlled limbs, restoring lost senses.
Wait, are we talking like Luke Skywalker prosthetic arm stuff?
We're closer than you might think, actually. For vision, there are implants.
Implants. Like in the eye.
In the retina, yeah. Even the visual cortex itself.
And those can restore sight.
It's not perfect vision yet, but some patients can perceive light, shapes.
Wow, that's incredible. What about prosthetic limbs?
Huge advancements there, too. Sensors pick up neural signals.
So you could think about moving your arm, and the prosthetic would move.
That's the goal. It's giving people with amputations so much more control.
That's amazing. And it's not just limbs, right?
Nope. Brain-computer interfaces, BCIs, are taking this even further.
Brain-computer interfaces. Okay, now we're talking straight-up mind control.
Haha, not quite. But BCIs create a direct link between brain and devices.
Like, what kind of device?
Computers, wheelchairs. Imagine someone with paralysis.
They could control these things with their thoughts.
Yeah, communicate, interact with virtual environments.
That's revolutionary, especially for people with, like, locked-in syndrome.
Exactly. It could give them a way to connect with the world again.
It's mind-blowing stuff, really. This is all so fascinating.
And we've only just scratched the surface. There's so much more to explore.
I can't wait to dive deeper, this future of brain disease treatment.
It's incredible, the possibilities and the potential to change lives.
It really is. But let's maybe take a closer look at some of these treatments.
Yeah, good idea. We've covered a lot of ground, but
We've got a lot more to unpack.
definitely. So where should we start? Maybe go back to gene therapy.
Gene therapy, yeah. That ALD success story is a big deal, but
But what does it actually tell us about other brain diseases?
right. And how does the whole thing even work? The steps involved.
Yeah, let's break that down.
Sounds good. We'll dig into all that after a quick break.
We'll be right back. So gene therapy, you asked about the steps involved. It's not simple.
Yeah, I figured there's got to be more to it than just injecting a gene.
Oh, way more. First, you have to identify the faulty gene.
Okay, so like with ALD, it's the gene that causes...
The buildup of those harmful fatty acids in the brain.
Right, ones that attack nerve cells and cause all the problems.
Exactly. So faulty gene identified. Next step is...
Create a healthy version.
Yep, a good copy of that gene. But then the question is...
How do you get it into the brain?
That's where things get really interesting. Viruses...
Viruses, like the things that make us sick.
Ha! I know, right? But hear me out. These are modified viruses.
Modified how?
They're engineered to be harmless, stripped down to the basics.
And then they're used to deliver the good gene.
Exactly. They become like delivery vehicles.
Like tiny Trojan horses, sneaking the gene in.
Perfect analogy. These modified viruses, they're called vectors.
Vectors, so they carry the good gene into the target cell.
Right. And in the case of ALD, those target cells are...
Brain cells.
Actually, for ALD, it's blood stem cells. They extract them.
From the patient?
Yeah. Treat those cells with the gene therapy vector in the lab.
And then transplant them back into the patient.
Exactly. Those modified stem cells, now they can produce the missing protein.
So it's like correcting the genetic defect at the source.
That's the idea. And the results, they've been amazing.
Like it actually works?
It slowed down ALD progression, even improved function in some patients.
Wow, that's incredible. So gene therapy, definitely promising.
For sure. But of course, scaling this up for more complex things.
Like Alzheimer's or Parkinson's?
Yeah, that's still a challenge. But the success with ALD, it gives us a roadmap.
Speaking of promising treatments, what about stem cells we talked?
Neural stem cells, yeah. Their potential to repair damaged brain tissue.
How would that actually work for something like Parkinson's?
Okay, so with Parkinson's, the problem is in the substantia nigra.
That's the part of the brain that...
Produces dopamine. And dopamine's crucial for movement.
Right, when those dopamine-producing cells die, you get...
Tremors, rigidity, all the movement problems of Parkinson's.
So stem cell therapy, the idea is to replace those lost cells.
Exactly. They're exploring different ways to do it, but one approach is...
Transplant healthy stem cells directly into the substantia nigra.
Yep. Try to rebuild that damaged part of the brain, essentially.
It sounds almost too simple. Just replace the damaged cells.
Oh, it's not that simple. Trust me. One big challenge is...
Making sure the transplanted cells survive.
Yeah, and integrate properly. Become part of the brain's circuitry.
It's not like you could just stick them in there and hope for the best.
Definitely not. Lots of fine-tuning involved, but if it works...
It could be revolutionary for Parkinson's treatment.
No doubt. Okay, let's switch gears a bit. Deep brain stimulation.
DBS. The brain pacemaker, we talked about how it disrupts...
Faulty brain circuits, but how does that help with Parkinson's specifically?
Yeah, break it down for us.
So DBS involves implanting electrodes, right? But not in the substantia nigra.
Not directly.
Not usually. They target other areas involved in movement control.
Like what?
The subthalamic nucleus or the globus pallidus. It's about modulating...
The whole movement circuit.
Exactly. By targeting these other areas, you bypass the damaged substantia nigra.
So it's like rerouting the brain signals, finding a different path.
Perfect analogy. And the results can be pretty amazing. People who can barely walk.
They can suddenly move more freely.
It can happen that quickly. It's not a cure, but...
But it could dramatically improve quality of life.
For sure. And while it's mostly used for Parkinson's, research is exploring
Other applications. You mentioned epilepsy, OCD.
chronic pain, too. Lots of potential there. But DBS, it's surgery, so...
What about those non-invasive techniques? TMS, for example.
Transcranial magnetic stimulation. No surgery required.
Yeah, we talked about that. It uses magnetic pulses, but remind me.
How it actually works. So you have this coil placed on the scalp.
Right, and it sends magnetic pulses through the skull to the brain.
And those pulses can either excite or inhibit neurons.
Depending on what you're trying to achieve.
Exactly. It's a way to fine-tune brain activity without surgery.
And we were talking about how it could be used for depression.
Yeah, TMS has shown a lot of promise for treating depression.
How does that even work? Magnets in depression seems strange.
It's about rebalancing brain activity. Depression seems to be linked to...
Imbalances in certain brain regions.
Right, so TMS can stimulate underactive areas or inhibit overactive ones.
Interesting. So, like, it's giving those brain regions a nudge in the right direction.
That's a good way to think about it. And the great thing about TMS
It's
is...
non-invasive, safe.
Exactly, and they're looking into it for other things, too.
You mentioned anxiety, chronic pain, stroke rehab.
Yeah, lots of potential applications. Okay, ready for another non-invasive one.
Hit me with it. What is it? TDCS?
Transcranial direct current stimulation. That's the one with the weak electrical current.
Right. Electrodes on the scalp. You were saying it can,
Influence brain activity, increase or decrease neuronal excitability.
by using this tiny current.
Yeah, it's pretty remarkable. Even a weak current can have an effect.
What kind of effect are we talking about?
Well, studies suggest it might help with cognitive function.
Really? So, like, thinking, learning, memory,
Potentially, yeah. And there's some evidence it might help with...
depression, and chronic pain, you said.
Right. But it's important to remember this is all still...
Experimental. We need more research.
Definitely. Don't go trying this at home, folks.
All right, fair enough. Now I'm ready to jump back into the really futuristic stuff.
Okay, you asked for it. Neuroprosthetics, brain-machine interfaces,
We talked about brain-controlled limbs, restoring senses. This is
where
more...
the line between brain and technology gets really blurry.
Yeah, this is like straight out of science fiction. But how does it actually work?
So neuroprosthetics are all about creating a direct connection.
Between the nervous system and external devices.
Exactly. Prosthetic limbs that respond to your thoughts.
So instead of muscle movements, you just think about moving your arm.
And the prosthetic would move. That's the goal, anyway.
Wow. So how do they do that?
It involves implanting sensors, either in the brain or muscles.
And those sensors detect the neural signals for movement.
Exactly. They're basically eavesdropping on the brain's commands.
And then those signals are translated into movement for the prosthetic.
That's the gist of it. And this technology, it's giving amputees.
A whole new level of control. It's amazing.
It is. And it's not just limbs, remember. We've got...
Visual prosthetics, restoring sight. How do those work?
Well, there are a couple of approaches. Some involve implanting a device...
In the
Right. It basically replaces the damaged part of the eye.
with an artificial one?
Kind of, yeah. The implant has electrodes that stimulate healthy retinal cells.
And those send signals to the brain, which are interpreted as...
Visual information. It's not perfect vision, but...
But it's something. What about people with damage to the optic nerve or the visual cortex?
Good question. For those cases, they're developing implants that...
Bypass the eye completely.
Yeah, and stimulate the visual cortex directly.
So they're essentially creating artificial vision in the brain.
It's mind-blowing, right? And the results are promising. Some patients can perceive...
Light shapes.
even some basic objects. It's amazing what they're achieving.
Truly incredible. And I think we talked about neuroprosthetics for hearing loss, too.
Cochlear implants, those have been around for a while, actually.
But they're still considered neuroprosthetics.
Definitely. They bypass the damaged parts of the inner ear.
And stimulate the auditory nerve directly.
Exactly. They've been hugely successful for people with severe hearing loss.
It's amazing how technology is blurring the line between...
Biological and artificial, restoring functions that were once lost.
It's almost like science fiction becoming reality.
It is, in a way. And we've only just begun to explore the possibilities.
The potentially neuroprosthetics, it's immense.
It really is. And it raises some big questions about...
The future of human enhancement. What's possible? What's ethical?
We're going to have some serious conversations about that.
As this technology continues to advance. But for now, let's shift gears a bit.
Sounds good. Where to next?
I'm really curious about brain-computer interfaces. BCIs, you said they...
Take neuroprosthetics a step further. They create a direct link.
Between the brain and external devices. Not just limbs, but...
Computers, wheelchairs. Imagine the possibilities for people with paralysis.
It's like giving them back control.
Exactly. Control over their environment, their communication.
We talked about how someone with locked-in syndrome could...
Use a BCI to communicate, control a computer cursor.
even express emotions. It's life-changing stuff.
It really is. And it's not just about communication. BCIs are also being used.
To help people with paralysis regain movement.
Some BCIs can control robotic exoskeletons, allowing people to walk.
Walk. Really?
Yeah, it's incredible. And others can control wheelchairs.
Giving people greater mobility, independence. It's amazing.
It is, but how do these BCIs actually work? How do they read brain signals?
Yeah, that's what I'm wondering. It sounds like magic.
It's not magic, but it's pretty close. One common method uses EEG.
E.g., electroencephalography, the thing with the cap and electrodes.
That's the one. Those electrodes pick up the electrical signals from the brain.
The tiny signals produced by neurons firing.
And then we use algorithms to decode those signals, translate them.
Into commands for external devices.
Exactly. The BCI is essentially learning to speak the brain's language.
That's wild. So, like, If I think about moving my arm,
The BCI could pick up on those signals and, say, move a robotic arm.
it's incredible how far we've come. But I imagine there is still
Challenges, oh yeah. One of the biggest is accuracy.
making sure the BCI is consistently interpreting brain signals correctly.
Especially in real-world environments. It's one thing to do it in a lab.
But out in the world, there are distractions, noise,
Exactly. It's a lot more complex. And then there's the issue of,
user-friendliness, making BCIs more intuitive, easier to use,
right now, they can be bulky, require a lot of training. But the potential,
is huge for people with disabilities, for all of us.
it could change how we interact with technology in a fundamental way.
I can't wait to see where this goes. It's really exciting stuff.
It is. Okay, ready to shift gears again?
Sure, what's next on the list? All right, so we've covered some pretty mind-blowing stuff. Gene therapy, stem cells, neuroprosthetics, even nanobots. But before we wrap up, there's one more thing I wanted to touch on.
Oh yeah, what's that?
It's called pharmacogenetics. It's not as, flashy as some of the other stuff we talked about.
But it's definitely got huge potential. It's all about personalized medicine.
Right, using genetics to figure out the best treatment for each individual.
Exactly. It's about moving away from that one-size-fits-all approach to medication.
Because we all know what works for one person might not work for another.
And not only that, but we might even be able to predict side effects.
And figure out the best dosage for each person.
That's the goal, yeah. Imagine no more trial and error with medications.
Just like the right drug at the right dose right from the start.
That would be incredible. It could save so much time, so much money.
And most importantly, it could prevent a lot of suffering from those side effects.
Exactly. So how does it work? Well, it all starts with your genes.
Our genes determine how our bodies process drugs, right?
Right. Some people have genes that make them metabolize certain drugs very quickly.
And others might metabolize those same drugs very slowly.
Exactly. And that can make a big difference in how effective a drug is.
And whether it causes side effects,
Pharmacogenetics can help us figure that out. So if someone metabolizes a drug slowly,
you'd give them a lower dose.
right, to avoid toxicity, and if they metabolize it quickly,
You might need a higher dose to get the same effect.
exactly. It's all about tailoring the treatment to the individual.
This is amazing stuff. It's like a personalized roadmap for medication.
It's pretty powerful, and the great thing is it's already being used in some areas of medicine.
Oh, really? Like where?
Well, one big area is cancer treatment. Certain chemo drugs only work for people with specific genetic markers.
So you can test for those markers before starting chemo.
Exactly. That way, if the drug is likely to be effective.
And avoid giving it to someone who won't benefit from it.
Right. It's all about making sure people get the treatments that are most likely to help them.
It's incredibly how far we've come. What other areas is it being used in?
They're using it for mental health conditions, cardiovascular disease, even pain management.
Wow, so many applications. It's really changing the game.
It is, and as we learn more about the human genome, we're going to see even more uses for pharmacogenetics.
It's a really exciting time to be in this field.
It is, and it's not just about pharmacogenetics. All the stuff we talked about today, it's giving me so much hope for the future.
Me too. Gene therapy, stem cells, neuroprosthetics, nanotechnology.
It's amazing to think about what's possible and what's just around the corner.
It's like we're on the verge of a revolution in brain disease treatment.
We are, and it's not just about extending life, it's about improving quality of life.
Giving people back their independence, their ability to do the things they love.
Exactly. That's what drives all of this research, to make a real difference in people's lives.
And for anyone out there who's been touched by brain disease, don't give up hope.
There's so much incredible work being done, and we're getting closer every day to finding new and better treatments.
This has been an incredible journey, exploring all these cutting-edge treatments.
Yeah, I've learned so much, and I hope our listeners have too.
So thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll see you next time.
Until then, stay curious.